I can't believe it's finally here. Because for a good while, it seemed pretty clear the series was dead and gone. But little did we know, it would make a triumphant return during what is now called the Year of the Ninja. Now, I know there was a decent amount of skepticism soon after 4 was announced. Not only has it been over a decade since the last game, but it's also being made by a different team. So the worry of will it stay true to what Ninja Gaiden is about started to rise with each passing day. And yeah, I get it. But this is a new. Back in the day, Sega had their own interpretations, and so did Natsume. So this isn't the first time, and it definitely won't be the last time either. The collective will have their time and place, but there will come a moment where a new team will arrive to bring their own vision to the series. Yeah, if you're a longtime fan, then you should be quite aware of this already. Because even looking at the 3D games, each one plays vastly different than the last one. Now, those massive shifts between titles do create their own distinct identity, but it also created division. 2 wasn't well received when it came out, and neither was 3. But over the years, they found their rightful place as one of the greats, even with their flaws. So instead of repeating history, again, let's approach this new entry with an open mind, and find what makes it unique amongst the rest. And hey, if it can follow the core fundamentals of short time to kill, emphasis on movement, and deadly enemies, then I think we have ourselves a winner. This is Combat Overview. Here we go over the general controls, their main mechanics, who or what we use them on, and then seeing how it all comes together. And to address the elephant in the room, no, Ryu is not the main character of NG4. The spotlight has completely shifted to the new protagonist, Yakumo. He will take up a majority of the runtime of this entry, having 16 chapters while Ryu only gets 4. That's about an 80-20 split, I think. So yeah, best get familiar with this guy. And while on first impressions his design didn't really speak to me at the time, now I do like the idea of combining Nameless and Yashimaru, having this bird-like theme mixed with a high-tech suit. But Yakumo definitely came out with a more modern anime look that I would have liked. Doesn't seem too distinct and reminded me a lot of that recent ninja Kamui instead. Yeah, I just wish he had that X factor to his appearance pretty much. Ayane on the other hand looks pretty amazing. Her design is actually very close to the Mature if you ask me, so I'm definitely a fan of her new redesign. Speaking of which, the game does take place after a decent time skip, so there's a clear futuristic angle to the overall style of the game. Can't really say I'm surprised either. NGO4 was already hinting at this sort of thing with the Ninja of the Future outfit, which also came with a matching plasma saber. Then NGB added the reskin mechanized commandos on higher difficulties, having this new sleek looking power armor. And of course, the hover cars in NG2's intro. But even then, this sort of thing isn't new in the world of ninja games. So having ninjas in these futuristic cyberpunk-esque settings is nothing we haven't seen before, or exclusive to one series. It's been a trope with ninja games for a long time. Who knew ninjas and robots would be such a cool mix, right? Anyways, let's get into the action. Okay, so Yakumo begins with these dual blades. Decent range, decent damage, decent everything. He truly is the all-rounder of the bunch. But as the game goes on, we're given a new weapon after certain bosses. These range from a rapier, which is amazing against a single target, just dishing out a ton of damage. It also excels at closing the distance with each attack, but its small hitboxes require more careful planning. Focusing on one enemy in a game all about crowd control can lead to a disaster, right? But that's where the staff comes into play, since it's meant to crowd control. Now their damage output is on the weaker side, so don't expect it to decimate larger enemies like in 2, but it still comes in handy against those clusters. And finally, the Assassin's Toolbox. Now this has some melee potential, but it's mainly a projectile weapon, and a damn good one. This is a solid lineup for sure, but it pales in comparison to previous games. Well, that's because we haven't mentioned the Blood Raven stance. So every weapon has their base form, but can access a secondary mode that drastically changes their appearance and their moveset. Could be this Tachi for quick slashing, but if held, can create even larger swipes to crowd control, or a multi-hitting drill to pierce for a ton of focus damage. And holding the attack input will keep them in place for that much longer before ending with a burst of damage. Then the hammer. This is a personal favorite, and in my opinion, is by far the strongest weapon in the entire game. Quick, damaging, crowd controls, dealing rate is incredibly high, and yeah, it's just great against everything, pretty much. But that's only if you've mastered its perfect release mechanic. Only then will you see this weapon's true potential. And finally, you'll get these large mechanical arms to pull out even larger weapons from this Pandora's box of his. And if you've mastered the release timing, it'll only get better. So yeah, you basically have 8 distinct weapons, all with their own pros, cons, and unique quirks to master. And from what I can tell, the following stage after collecting our new weapon seems to be designed around showcasing it, sort of like a tutorial, right? So try your best to use the new additions as soon as possible. Because when push comes to shove, we want to be comfortable enough with our entire arsenal to be able to adapt in a moment's notice. And with the help of on-the-fly weapon swapping, yeah, we can do just that. Now to be honest with you, I have no issue with this being in the game, because after playing this many times, I can confidently say this is still a Ninja Gaiden game. It's not abandoning or losing its identity for doing so. Mega Man, once upon a time, could only change special weapons through the pause menu. But in Mega Man 7, we can finally swap them in and out in real time. And you know what? The core fundamentals that made those games fun was still intact. I'd even go on record saying that 7 is one of the better classic games, but that's besides the point. The point is that adding new features and mechanics don't spell doom and gloom. That somehow the series would be less of itself if such things were changed. So to me, change and innovation is a good thing. It just always comes down to execution. Because if we're not careful, things can get out of hand and lead to some weird territory. But that doesn't mean nothing good comes from changing things up every once in a while. RE4 is nothing like the classics, but we like it, right? Kid Icarus Uprising is nothing like its debut, but is so fondly remembered that people are still asking for a port. And in more recent times, I've only heard positive things about Metal Slug Tactics, even though it's not a running gun. So, call me crazy, but we wouldn't have all of these amazing new takes on the formula if it wasn't for experimentation. And I think the occasional slip up is worth the trade-off, if you ask me. Now, there's still more examples of NG4 making changes, and that's how it removed running attacks, on-landing attacks, and directional attacks. Losing on landings is a shame, because veteran players would know just how crucial on-landing lights were in 2, and how devastating on-landing 360 heavies were in 3. But sadly, they're gone without a replacement. That's not the case for the other 2 options, however, because running and directional attacks have sort of been combined and replaced by these moves with back to forward inputs. So these new directional attacks aren't as restrictive and allow us to access a similar gap closing iframe move whenever we need it. But there's plenty more use cases than that, because depending on the weapon, its form, and if it's done with a light or heavy attack, you will either side switch, knock away, delimb, knock down, and yeah, it can keep going. But there's a lot of added utility with these new moves, and even more reason to use your entire moveset than ever before. So experiment. And real quick, 360 attacks are still here. Every attack, weapon, and form lead to different outcomes too. Can be to approach, to crowd control, to knock away, to reposition, and so on and so forth. But our UTs are still present, of course. Get full iframes while active and has a decent chance to crowd control with those large hitboxes. It is still possible to whiff that initial hit, but it's less common in this game. But once you land these, you'll realize they're not as strong as they once were. And that's because we lost the ability to do level 3 charges like in Razor's Edge. So their potential ceiling has been lowered. Not only that, they seem less effective in general, because it's pretty common to get only 1 or maybe 2 kills with an entire level 2 UT. Definitely a far cry from previous games. So you'll be lucky if you see yourself move on to the next target because the damage seems nerfed, and they definitely won't die to the double delimb rule we had since 2. But if you do happen to kill with it, you at least teleport a good distance like in Razor's Edge, and won't end prematurely like in 2. Not as often anyways. Yeah, it kinda sucks they're not as strong as they used to be, or maybe they're just balanced for once. Who knows? But alright, Essence has made a return. I know 3 made a very divisive change to remove them, but they reverted that decision in this game. Now, even though it's back, it's not the same as you once remember. For one, we no longer have different essence like yellow, blue, and red. Instead, we have these brand new Blood Essence. Collecting these will slightly heal you, and I'm not kidding when I say this, but the amount of health you get is so minuscule, it might as well not exist. I'll collect 5 or more of these, and nothing substantial happens. Even the small orbs in past games did way more than this. Yeah, just ignore this mechanic because I sure did. Anyways, they seem to drop out random with regular kills, and the 50 combo hit rule doesn't seem to apply here either, but at least they consistently drop after kills with both OTs and UTs, so that's good. But the different sizes are definitely random no matter what you do. Okay, the general rules are the same. Hold block to avoid auto absorption, but once you do, the flowchart is the same as before. Chain a dash into wind run, then follow up with either a wind path or flying swallow to move around. Which of course leads to on landings. Doing so will remove startup of heavy attacks, which are used to suck in those nearby orbs for immediate UT. Here's the thing, if you're a longtime player, just be warned about the speed of which essence is drawn in, because it's noticeably slower than previous games. Not by a lot, mind you, but it's just enough where I have to fight my muscle memory. So be prepared for that. And one more thing, I just wish online jumps were still a thing because the extra amount of control was so important in previous games. So let's hope to add it back in some future update. Now the rules are basically the same as before. Absorbing 1 orb equals a level 1 UT, and 2 or more orbs will create a max level UT. But since everything is a generalized blood essence, I say the entire resource management game is extremely simplified. Especially since the trade-off between healing or UTs is an easy decision to make. Because as weak as UTs may be, they're definitely more helpful compared to the near non-existent heals. So, don't expect any strategy between wanting heals or going for an instant charge via on landings. If that was the case, it would also been fun to do fluttering in this game for that precise essence management, but that level of control or decision making isn't needed in the slightest. So UT it is. For sub-weapons, we have the standard shurikens, but as a quick recap, they're mainly used to mark your next target, crowd control, and reduce end lag with shuriken cancels. So after major actions like Izuna drop, UT, OTs, etc., it's a good idea to toss out a shuriken to find your next target as soon as possible. Not only will it force that enemy to stand still, but it will point you in the right direction, making it so much easier to follow up with a dash, wind run, into imagination. It's also not a bad idea to throw a few out after a flying swallow or wind path for a similar effect, which is to make your landings that much safer. Oh, just a side note, if you happen to not grab any essence, or if there wasn't any around when you attempted a non-landing, just know you can still shuriken cancel the brief heavy hold like in Razor's Edge. So if you ever played that game, then this will make 4 that much faster. But yeah, like I mentioned before, shuriken cancels are used to remove end lag and extend your pressure. Basic tech known for over 20 years, so it should be common knowledge by now. You can even shuriken cancel with every weapon out too, just like in Razor's Edge. So I'm glad they kept that in. I will say this though, it is quite weird how Yakumo will toss out a burst of shurikens instead of just one, like Ryu. Because of that, the animation cancels are a bit more delayed than you expect. Still fast enough where I was still able to do what I need to do. But again, just another instance where veteran players have to delay their muscle memory a tad bit. But yeah, besides the basic shurikens, we have no other projectiles. So no bow, no smoke bomb, no windmill, no nothing. Kinda sucks, but there is a replacement. So every weapon has a projectile attack while in their Blood Raven stance, which range from blade beams to a shotgun blast. They all have their place, so use them when needed. This game also added the brand new caddis wire, which is a grappling hook, pretty much. Now, don't expect complete player freedom with this. You can only interact with these predetermined anchor points, which you can use them on enemies like in Rise of the Ronin or Batman, but that's not the case either. Now, it does have its moments in combat to reposition, but it's mainly seen for traversal reasons. Cool idea, but underutilized. On to defenses. We still have the classic block, denies basic attacks, small projectiles, and covers you entirely, so you'll snap to wherever needed. Now, the guard break and guard crush system from NGB is still here, It's just slightly altered. Okay, the guard is strong as ever, but you can no longer block indefinitely. So after a certain amount of hits, your guard will be broken. So with each hit you withstand, your guard will be broken down bit by bit, and eventually shattered. And you can see its durability in real time, going from white to yellow and finally red. Because of that, it actually reminded me of Samurai Showdown a bit. But yeah, once exposed, the durability needs time to recover even after it breaks. So now you must really rely on your movement to let your defenses recover for when you really need it. Now I like this new take on the system because it prevents turtling no matter what the enemy type. Because in the past, we could safely hide behind our block forever depending on the matchup. But this change makes sure every enemy can apply real pressure for once. Now those guard crush attacks are now these new power attacks. So these moves have hyper armor and will deal chip damage if blocked. Pretty dangerous options that are used to force your hand, as you can tell. But lucky for us, we have multiple avenues to deal with these. For one, you can dodge it. Very simple to do and it's free of charge. You even get a few options if perfect dodge, so definitely the more consistent and low risk way to avoid these. Or you can block it while in the Blood Raven stance. So at a large cost of your Bloodbind gauge, you'll enhance your blocking capabilities to completely deny the power attack. This has its moments, but it's rarely seen. That's because the way better option is to interrupt it. So by connecting any kind of Blood Raven attack, you'll stop them in the tracks. Which also leaves them wide open to a guaranteed punish. It's basically the brute burst counter from Neo 2, just requires a bit of your blood meter in this case. Now they won't stay staggered forever, but depending how close you were at the time, they'll be left vulnerable for even longer duration. Should be obvious by now, but this is why you want to play up close and personal. It's Ninja Gaiden after all, right? However, if there's ever a moment where the enemy is just too far away or you're out of meter, remember that Wind Run and Wind Path exist. The initial leap has iframes, as well as the head stomp, right? So that's an alternative way to evade this incoming attack if needed. You can even guillotine throw the enemy directly, nice way to interrupt them depending on their size. But if not, you can still use those throw iframes by grabbing some other nearby enemy. That works too. The last option I'll mention is also pretty situational, but there's actually these unique jumps while in the Blood Raven form. These allow us to quickly reposition above the madness. I think it even has iframes. So yeah, it makes them pretty useful to avoid those AoE power attacks because of that. And of course, iframes from OTs and UTs are a great way to avoid these as well. But yeah, that's the new power attacks. I'm actually a fan of this new interpretation. It might be different from previous games, but it's not like each title didn't have their own approach to force us out of hiding. 2 had IS spam, and 3 had Still on Bone. Some are more cleaner than others, but the goal is still the same, and that's to keep us on the move. Oh, and one more thing before we move on from this guard. The default controls are wrong, so please be sure to rebind the block as soon as possible. If you've been a long-time NG player, then yeah, this is sort of mandatory. Okay, moving on. I guess in more ways than one, because if we add movement to that guard, then we'll go into our dash step. As you can tell, we didn't get some new evasive move like every mainline game. But still, it gets the job done. Complete iframes and you can do as many as you want back to back. But as you know, the roll, dash step, or slide are never meant to be one and done. Most times. You should always follow them up with a wind run. And from there go into wind path, guillotine throw, or flying swallow. Chaining those iframes is extremely important in these games, as you know. But yeah, depending on the situation, each have their own utility. Besides the iframes, of course. Wind path can interrupt and stagger not one, but multiple enemies back to back. And just like in Razor's Edge, we can even aim our liftoff. So there's that much more control on where we want to reposition as we crowd control. Guillotine throw is finally back and better than ever. Best it's ever been in my opinion. So, where do I begin? Okay, not only does it have iframes, but you can now use it in midair, can even anti-air those leaping enemies. It also picks up enemies off the ground. You can even redirect it now too, which is very useful for certain stage layouts. But most importantly, those thrown enemies have an actual hitbox. So now this guy is a projectile for us to use however we wish. And great thing is, it'll autocorrect for you if that enemy happens to be above or below you. So its reach has no bounds, as you can see. Yeah, you don't want to underestimate this new throw. It's so much more versatile than past games. I'd even say it's the best version we've seen in the entire series. I think it's that good. And you know what? This is the most beat 'em up feeling game in the 3D series. Because think about it, guillotine throw is used in the same ways. You can send them into environmental hazards or group them into a corner to set up massive collateral damage. Wall splats might not set up guaranteed delims anymore, but the amount of control you have to manipulate your or their positioning with all these new tools is incredibly fun. And it helps that the level design lends itself to create these interactions. Sometimes. There's definitely a lot of pits in this game, so off they go. And just so you know, it seems to me that you can win run on reaction, more or less. So if things get dicey, just go ahead and chain into a win path or guillotine throw midstream. But yeah, use it as much as possible. Before we move on, I want to go over another grab move, Izuna Drop. As you may know, it has iframes and does a bit of crowd control with its finishing splash damage. Not only that, but it's become a universal move, so everything has their own Izuna Drop, which is nice. The string to access it is different between weapons, but you're free to use it no matter what weapon you main. So that's a welcome change. And yep, it is still possible to remove landing lag after that Izuna Drop. You can't do windmill slash for obvious reasons, but you can still prep a quick UT with nearby essence, or release that brief heavy hold to find your next target like in Razor's Edge. Okay, Flying Swallow is good as you remember. Can cover large distances with complete iframes, and can chain a few of them back to back. But it does have a new change, and that's how it's a universal attack now too. Before it wasn't available to all weapons, but now it is. And because of all those reasons, Flying Swallow has now become your best approach option in this game. That's because no enemy counters it too. So you're free to use it as much as possible to either get in or get out. Well, enemies do block it still, but they don't outright anti-air you like in Black. Hope that's changed in a future revision. It'll be cool to have one enemy that does that. But until then, take advantage of this while you can. Just remember, begin with dash, into wind run, then flying swallow. You'll begin with iframes, then you'll be pointed in the right direction soon after. Again, with iframes. Then after you make contact, toss a few aerial shurikens before landing. It'll let you know who's closest to you, as well as make your on-landing setups that much safer. Now, the previous counter system has been replaced by something quite expansive. So in its place, we're given a perfect dodge, perfect guard, and a perfect parry. The dodge is self-explanatory. It's also by far the easiest of the bunch and the least risky. For one, mistiming it isn't a massive punish since it still gives iframes and it can be chained into other options. But if timed right, it will slow time just enough to get behind them and land a follow-up. And that's it. So you just have a brief moment to observe your surroundings before getting tossed into the blender once more. Now the perfect blocked and perfect parry are interesting, and that's because they're basically the Isen and critical Isen from Onimusha. But there's way more unique follow-ups in this game compared to those. You can do lights, heavies, or even a Blood Raven attack. And each one of those weapons have a slightly different counter attack as well. Of course, the perfect guard is the middle of the three to perform, especially since guard buffers exist. So if you time it early, you'll be fine. You'll just snap into a guard without problem. Oh, and by the way, you can do many of these defensive options during recovery and out of hit stun. Doesn't matter if you're on the ground or in the air, these options are still available to you. Yeah, guard buffering seems to be power crept out of relevancy. Has its moments for sure, but you'll most likely find yourself doing other options. And lastly, Fatal Flash. If you're familiar with classic action games like Onimusha, Kingdom Hearts 1, DMC 1, and Zoe 2, this is comparable to a clash parry. So by timing your attack with the enemy's attack, you'll interrupt them, which leaves them wide open for a follow-up. Now, to prove my ever-growing suspicion that NG has always been a spiritual successor to Onimusha, doing these will also guarantee souls to drop, or in this case, blood essence. But that's not all, because if you happen to time your follow-up at the right moment, you'll also delim. So whenever you see that white glow or shimmer over your character, That's your cue for the perfect Fatal Flash. Yeah, there's multiple skill checks to perform this counterattack compared to the rest, and that's how a Clash parry should be. Now, as you can imagine, these are very risky to perform, and that's double true in the context of Ninja Gaiden. Because as any longtime player of the series should know, we always want to hold guard at all times. So to abandon that safety net and attempt to clash is a massive decision to make, because that leaves us vulnerable to get hit from all sides in an instant, right? So yeah, you really do need immense amount of skill to perform these in a heated battle, especially in a crowd of enemies that are ready to pounce. But at least the reward matches the effort. All in all, I'm a big fan of the new defensive options. There's different routes that require varying degrees of skill. And as the saying goes, parry is for the confident, block is for the uncertain, and dodge is for the fearful. So which one are you today? Looking at the HUD, the yellow bar on the top left is our health. And you'll probably be happy to hear this, but healing items have made a return. I know removing them was a bold choice in 3, but now we return to something a little more familiar. So yeah, can refill it with the usual small and large heals as always. Oh, and if you're wondering, item capacity is standardized across the board no matter the difficulty, which means it's more like 2 instead of NGB in that regard. But since we're on the subject of specific killing mechanics, it's possible to heal while being grabbed by enemies like in Sigma, or vice versa. So if you're in the middle of an Izuna drop or UT, you can still heal as well. Yeah, you can definitely save yourself with the last second heal. Unfortunately, you can't pocket max HP upgrades. They still heal you, but once you've collected all the pieces, then it's automatically used right then and there like in Sigma 2. There's also a few terminals throughout the stage, and visiting them will fully restore your health bar. And it's not just a one-time use either. It actually works multiple times. But there's never a reason to backtrack like in Vanilla 2, so this was never used in routing, but still neat. Rebirth items, which are the talisman equivalent, do not fully heal on revive, however. I have no idea as to why, but hopefully that's fixed in a revamped edition. Speaking of fixing healing mechanics, the entire Bloodborne-inspired rally system isn't really effective, and neither is a Blood Essence. Both have very little stakes in the moment-to-moment gameplay, and have never been considered in a single time through my multiple playthroughs. Even the Grey House system isn't as prominent or lenient like it was in 2. So, until these are buffed, ignore these mechanics entirely. There's really no reason to pay attention to them. At least there's some alternatives. My favorite being the lifesteal accessories, especially the one tied to OTs. Because since it's a common occurrence, it really does help more often than any other stuff. So it's become a mainstay. But hey, if you happen to fall in battle, you'll come back with full health at the most recent encounter. That usually came into play for bosses, but useful either way. If you played God Hand, then it works in a similar fashion. And yeah, both games have you take a dent in the resolve screen because of it. Now, if you continue to die in a certain spot, you'll be given a free item. So soft locking is no longer a thing to worry about. Because I've heard some horror stories of players not properly preparing for Alma or the core. So this will help prevent that, I'm sure. Now in the bottom left corner, we get to see our 4 weapons of choice. Pretty simple. But that other yellow meter besides it is what's needed to do actions while in the Blood Raven form. Now activating this doesn't cost you. Only once we do anything from using its melee attacks, the projectiles, the jump, or its enhanced block, does it start to pull from this resource, or Blood Buying Gauge as it's called. So as powerful as these options are, they are kept under control. Now it will passively refill over time, which means you can wait for it like a cooldown, but that's boring. So if you take the proactive approach instead, you'll see a noticeable boost to its recovery. And that's because each attack you land of any kind will add to it. So there's a nice feedback loop into playing up close and personal. But yeah, Blood Raven form is a core part of Yakumo's playstyle, so it's a must-learn mechanic if you wish to succeed in this game. It's no different than having to master the once new D-Limb system, right? And cool thing is, both promote aggressive plays, which is fun. So don't be stingy with this meter and get into the action. And lastly, the Berserk gauge. Now to fill the circle, just play the game, because being hit or landing hits will add to this meter. And of course, OTs will replenish it the most. So yeah, you better rely on those NG2 instincts. Now there is a distinct difference between both gauges, and that's how this one does not fill passively. Instead, it's more of a momentum-based resource. So it's all about building it as soon as possible before it slowly degrades if left alone. But as you can imagine, you should be in the action at all times anyways. The game heavily rewards those who take the initiative. Just play Ninja Gaiden, pretty much. Anyways, once full, you'll have this AoE burst on activation. I think it has iframes, but it sure does interrupt enemies both big and small. Not only that, but your Bloodbind gauge gets filled by a good amount as well. Now I'm starting to get reminded of Kingdom Hearts 2. But yeah, from there, we have a short period of time with this massive buff. So you can see it as a way to reverse the odds or to continue your pressure. Now, while the damage buff is nice to have, that's not the true power of the Berserk state. Because once combined with charged Blood Raven attacks, we're actually able to insta-kill every enemy caught in its hitbox. Besides bosses, of course. So now your goal is to get as many of these bloodbath kills while you can. And that's because this meter depletes extremely fast on activation. So aim for those large crowds or high priority targets. Or both if you can. Now there's one last ability to mention, and that's Bloodbath Slaughter. So at the cost of your remaining meter, you will unlock this devastating finishing move. And similar to Warrior's Abyss, we want to hang on to this ender until the last possible second. Having more meter will equate to more damage, but it's all about playing the game of chicken with our resources. You gotta cause as much destruction as possible, right? And that's it. These are the new meter systems of this game. I had a lot of fun with what Razor's Edge was doing with its meter mechanics, and I like what 4 does here as well. And that's because both games encourage non-stop aggression, which in turn replenishes our powerful tools. Nice little feedback loop to encourage an aggressive playstyle. The new upgrade system is definitely a bit different than last time. So now there's 2 separate ways to improve our character. You can either buy basic combat skills from Tyrant, or you can buy specific weapon skills through the pause menu. Now weapons are simple enough, just need to use them long enough to increase their proficiency level, and that's how you gain access to more options to buy. Now Tyrant is a bit strange at first, but he's basically selling us these scrolls from NGB. So he'll be the one to sell us the Flying Swallow, Uzuna Drop, and even on landings. You even have to buy both Wind Runs and Wind Path, believe it or not. Yeah, now that's a very odd choice to make. But I guess it's there to let new players know these mechanics even exist in the first place. So it's a necessary evil, I suppose. But man, does it make the first chapter feel incredibly uncomfortable to play. Not having the pure basics that held everything together just feels wrong. But like I said, it won't take long before you can buy them. Then the game becomes exponentially better once you do. Guess it's no different than past games really, where the first few chapters are the hardest before easing up over time with future upgrades. It's how it's always been, I suppose. Oh, and by the way, we have a training room as well. You get to pick a specific enemy, adjust the behavior, and tweak a few parameters. It's great to test out new abilities, mechanics, or matchups. Gotta see this make a return after being absent for a decade. Speaking of returning features, armlets have been reintroduced, or accessories as they're called here. And just like in NGB, these will give unique passives. Some are simple as improving meter gain, increasing damage output, or raising defenses. But there are more niche or situational ones. I mentioned it earlier, but there's some that lifesteal under certain conditions. But the one I liked the most during my Master Ninja playthrough was the Ashen Pipe. So at the cost of never building Berserk, your Blood Raven attacks now have a random chance to proc a Bloodbath kill. It's a roll of the dice, but it really did come in handy against those elite enemies. And once you beat the game, there's NG Plus exclusive side missions that reward you with even more equipment. And some of these even alter a weapon's base mechanics, giving them a powerful buff, but at an interesting cost. So yeah, have fun mixing and matching these to form your own synergies. When it comes to enemies, we're first introduced to the Dark Dragon Order. Now the ones with swords are the basic infantry. Now don't let their low rank fool you, because they can still cause some trouble. So they have a basic 2-hit combo that always starts with the Rising Slash, and the follow through is always consistent, so you can attempt a clash if you can. There's even a few burst options in neutral to be aware of, but if you block them, they're lifted in lag. Besides that, they have this retreating leap that leaves behind a bomb, and of course, they can pressure a block with their very own power attack. So yeah, they might be small fry, but they have the tools and the numbers to cause a real threat at any given moment. Next are ones building a Naginata. So these guys have a bit more agency to the moveset, being a lot more aggressive in their approach, which means their main job is to destroy your guard. And that's because they have a lot of strings consisting of multi-hitting attacks. So guard while you can, but it will not last forever around these guys. But if you did manage to block the entire combo, they tend to be left in end lag long enough for guaranteed punish. Though in all honesty, you shouldn't be guarding around these guys too much. I feel it's best to rely on movement more than anything else. So Flying Swallow, Wind Path, Guillotine Throw, and Blood Raven attacks, of course. I actually think perfect dodging is a great equalizer here. So guard a few attacks, but use their flurry against them to set up an easy perfect dodge counter attack. Now it seems fine now, but I'm showcasing this in a training room with a single enemy. So this is a very controlled situation, but even then, he's forcing me out of my block near instantly. So once you toss one of these guys into a crowd of enemies, yeah, they'll become a lot more scary than they are right now. So be warned. The gunners and rocket launchers are the many thorns in your side. As you'd expect, these guys will hang back to deal constant pressure from multiple angles. Doesn't matter where you are, they'll be sure to lay down that suppressing fire. Which means it's all about moving around, because you'll die from 1,000 cuts if you don't. Luckily, they're super weak and already separate themselves from the crowd. There's also jetpacks that share a similar role, and these guys might seem out of reach at first, but once you remember that Blood Raven attacks exist, it'll start to make sense. You can also launch a nearby enemy and throw them into flyers that way too. Or you can use that caddis wire to level the playing field. So pull yourself up and press heavy attack. The target will prioritize them, and it even leads to an instant drop. Up next are the dreaded windmill shurikens. To be honest with you guys, these troopers scared me for the longest. They're super fast, and those massive shurikens are kind of intimidating. But with the help of the training room, I realized those dashes are all for show. It seems like he'll do at least 3 of them before making their next move, which can be one of 2 power attacks. If he backflips away, it's pretty clear he's about to toss out his 2 shurikens. He can either perfect dodge or use a Blood Raven movement to avoid it that way as well. Or the many other iframe options, of course. While the other power attack looks pretty intense, but it's nothing too serious once you realize he'll always stop right in front of you. There's also enough windup to interrupt it in time, or to reposition with Wind Path as well. Besides that, he can toss retreating bombs to force your hand, or he'll do a quick side swipe. So yeah, they're speedsters, but it's definitely not a guessing game as to when they'll act. Now, when you get your hands on them, do not panic, because this will most likely be the first time seeing a blocking enemy. And if you keep mashing, you'll be punished by their counter attack. But here's the thing, their guard breaking power attack system is a 2-way street. So whenever an enemy blocks, it's time to use a Blood Raven attack to shatter the defenses for a brief moment. The same concept applies while in the air too. That's because he also block Raven parry your aerial assault. So now we have bullets, rockets, leaping enemies, and of course their very own defensive options to deny juggles. Anyways, if you're anticipating any of this stuff, just be preemptive with those Blood Raven attacks midstream. And lastly, the heavy infantry. These massive dudes seem super scary at first, but with the help of the training room, I quickly realized they're pretty simple. Not only are they slow, but most importantly, they have short combos. So you can honestly block their entire string and prep your Blood Raven attack once it ends. That's because they always attempt a power attack as a finisher. So it's a constant punish setup for us to abuse. But yeah, perfect hammer releases do a ton of damage. But if that's too hard right now, use the rapier instead. Then lock them down with back-to-back fully charged drill attacks. It actually might be the better option of the 2 actually. There's also one with a railgun, and same stuff applies. Get in close and use hammer releases. And in that same area, you'll see these missile turrets. Just don't approach them head on and you'll be good. So be sure to sidestep a bit and go in for the triple flying swallow once in range. It's actually pretty cool to see the game use these things alongside the levels as a hazard. Glad to have some classic counter design in play. Now onto lanterns. These little guys are my favorite enemies in the game, because they're the perfect limits test if a player truly understands how to play Ninja Gaiden, which is to never stop moving. If you're static, they'll rush you down with a self-destruct. If you stay in the air for too long, they'll shoot you down. If you stick around after killing them, you'll be damaged by post-mortem. Yeah, if you get hit, then it's entirely your fault. And that harsh reality is why I think newcomers will have a lot of trouble with these guys. But this is what I do. I like to launch them, do 2 light attacks, and finish off with a flying swallow. Quick and effective. From there I change iframes to approach the next one, and repeat. Again, they might seem like fodder at first, but no. They teach you firsthand that standing still is a no-no. You're just asking to be overwhelmed if you do. It's actually a pretty intuitive way to instill such a valuable lesson. So, you need to be in constant motion, or at least be prepared to reposition on a dime. That's just Ninja Gaiden 101 for you. Oni. These guys hard counter guillotine throw, so they'll deny these entirely by shoving you away. You can still win past them, but that throw must be earned. Besides that, you can fight them as any other enemy, but a general rule of thumb is to use Blood Raven attacks more often than not. That's because they like to block quite a lot, both on the ground and in the air. So preemptively pull out those Blood Raven attacks mid-combo to shadow through any potential defenses. Next are these armored sickles. Not only do they punish guillotine throw attempts, this time with a much harsher counter, but they also use their blade arms as a massive shield. So you must break through with any kind of Blood Raven attack, whether it be melee or projectile. Both are fine, just depends on the encounter. Anyways, those quick swipes with the Blood Raven Tachi were great here. Guard breaks, large enough to hit nearby enemies, and has a really high delim rate. I really like the hammer though. You won't have it at this point of the game, but mastering these perfect releases will absolutely destroy them. So keep that in mind for repeat playthroughs. Tengu, as you'd imagine, like to stay back or fly in the air. Because of that, use Blood Raven projectiles. We should have the drill by the time we first meet them, so use his projectiles to shred them from afar. Otherwise, use the basics of chaining evasive options into Flying Swallow to close the gap and follow up as needed. I actually really like the Rapier in this matchup because of its single target focused moveset. And surprisingly, throwing them off a cliff is an instant kill. Hey, they may have wings, but they seem to forget how to use them. If you ask me, it would be a great rework to have them recover midair. Perhaps in a re-release, right? But until then, abuse that throw. And Enra. These dog-like beasts are very evasive. The spamming lights with the dual blades will be dodged pretty easily. The Rapier's light attack seems a lot better though. Again, that's because it's meant to hyper-focus on a single enemy. So use that to your advantage. But yeah, besides that, they can summon 2 fireballs if left alone, dive bomb you from the sides, or rush you down with 3 back-to-back slashes. So it's a good idea to be light on your feet in a crowd of these things. For the kettles, use dual blades. These weapons are very quick and allow for a more reactionary playstyle, so it makes it a lot easier to perfect dodge the raining projectiles or to quickly Blood Raven their power attack. But yeah, once staggered, I like to swap to the Rapier for my punish combos. Could be a placebo, but I feel like it deals enough damage to kill it soon after. Just know, they're resistant to manual UTs, but if you absorb Essence however, then it will go through. Small detail to be aware of, but it can help get rid of them in a pinch. Ghostfish. It is good to see a familiar face here. But yeah, these guys are super easy as always. Just need to be on top of your crowd control. Luckily, we just got the staff right before beating them. So, just mash lights because it'll do a great job of clearing the room. But if they latch on, do 360Y. You have to buy this move, but it's a great way to swat them away. Now, I haven't tested this for sure, but I think they even interrupt your UTs if they're still latched on. So they seem to have a unique role to deny certain playstyles and tactics. Again, I'm glad this sort of counterplay exists in this game. These kind of things were sorely missed in Ninja Gaiden 2, for example. Must be a class reunion because zombies made a return as well. And again, since we recently got the staff, use that. Its speed and range are perfect to crowd control a horde of these things. Just remember, the Lunar's damage is quite low, but that's where the hammer comes into play. because those perfect releases will absolutely decimate these guys. They literally explode in a few hits. Besides that, dual blade light attacks seem to deal in by the end of their standard string. You can probably guess what I'm about to say for these dogs, which is yeah, use the hammer. I've rarely used anything else because the perfect releases do an amazing job at deliming. And those wide swings with the added blast effects are a great way to crowd control the surrounding pack as well. Yeah, you really can't go wrong with this thing, as you can tell. There's also enemy spawners, but doing the Tachi's full light combo seems to kill pretty consistently. No charge required either. Or you can use a blood essence from those nearby enemies to safely kill these things as well. Volt Ogre, I think these guys are surprisingly evasive. They also like to block a lot. So yeah, the defensive game is pretty good. But instead of worrying about it, I just hang back a bit and start to charge every attack of the Tachi's light combo. Slower startup, but if you can land the initial hit, then you're golden. Because they will be left in enough hit stun to let the next hit land. Which again, leaves them stunned long enough for the next charge attack. And doing all of this has a good chance to deal them as well. So clean up house once you do. Thank goodness for the training room. Because at first these guys look really terrifying, but they're actually very straightforward. And that's because they're pretty stationary most times, and will actually jump back before making their move. But even if they do attack up close, their swings are very well telegraphed. Well, since they're big body, I like to use the rapier for the focus fire. And if they jump back, it'll actually catch them, or you can use this projectile instead. Either way, it's great to lock them down. Now usually they have some sort of backup, but in that case, just focus on the small fry and use that essence to focus this guy at the end. Very much like PS2 Shinobi. For the imps, I sort of lean back on my NGB playstyle. Can play a bit more defensive, wait for them to act, then punish with an Uzuna drop. Honestly, just fish for those launchers in general, because NG4 now allows for longer aerial combos and cancels to remove any lag as well. So we can extend our punish in a few ways compared to the first game. And of course, guillotine throw will get the job done pretty nicely. Fangals, Fangals, Fangals. These guys are getting scarier by the day. That's because they don't get their limb nowhere near as easily as they did in 2, and there's no way to stun loop them like in 3. They also hit really hard, covered in hyper armor, and have a lot of health. Yeah, these guys might as well be considered a mini boss, to be honest. They're just half brutal. They at least have the same attacks though. So long-time players should be familiar with their forward combo, double fireball, leap and grab, and fire breath. But there's a few added power attacks, of course. I'd recommend the dual blade since it's a fast and versatile option. I'm able to land my basic string fast enough before they attempt a counterattack. Or perfect dodge or ender to follow up with a blood raven attack. Now it is easy to fight them one-on-one like I am here, but that's rarely the case. There's most likely going to be another Vanguard nearby, or an entire crowd to back them up. So the 1v1 is a rare situation. So the best bet is to incorporate wind path, to stagger or at least iframe through their stuff. Then you can do aerial blood raven attacks to deal direct damage, and then with the sweeping attack to crowd control. But yeah, that's the last of them. And I gotta say, the enemy variety is crazy good. Every chapter adds a minimum of 2 enemies, so there's always something new to fight, as well as the occasional weapon to keep things interesting. Not only that, but there's actual enemy composition, which is a massive improvement over something like Vanilla 2. Not to mention how the entire roster presents some actual counterplay as well. So 4 definitely delivered here, especially as a vanilla game. Let's just hope we get even further development with the DLC. Now here's our first major boss of the game, the DDO Commander. I remember thinking he looked pretty awesome during the early trailers, but the devs weren't lying when they described him as a fair fight. A lot of the boss fights are about getting in close and never backing off, and that's because we'll get very consistent reactions if we do. And in the case of this guy, he will either prep a power attack in neutral, or he'll do a sleeping strike, which is the beginning of this multi-hit combo. It will guard break you this early in the game, to try your best to dodge out of it, and make your way behind him to punish. But as you can tell, it's a lot of matching line attacks, wait for the escape option, and answer back. Which is also true for part 2 of this fight. Just know, all bosses will drop a single essence after ending their first phase. So use it to prep a UT. But wait until they've done their burst, because it'll interrupt your charge if you don't. And even then, don't release it too soon because bosses are invulnerable during their transitional phase. So you have to wait a bit before unleashing that UT. Anyways, phase 2 is no different than 1. So it still has a power attack to neutral, but it does have a different combo this time. It's 1-2, delay, 1-2 into power attack. Super easy to spot, especially if you notice a pause in between. So be ready with the Blood Raven. Yeah, it boils down to the same strategy. Not just for this fight, but all boss fights are near identical to each other. So I won't have any hyper-specific strats to share like before. A bit of me is bummed out that these bosses aren't as unique. They seem more simple in comparison. Or maybe they're just intuitive for once. Who knows, right? Either way, I have a feeling this will be a welcome change for many. So Proto Goliath will have a singular low sweep, a forward kick, or 2 different power attacks in neutral. As you can tell, everything is very slow and easily reactable. So the strategy is to mash lights and react to each move by either blocking or interrupting it with a Blood Raven attack. Just a heads up, but be ready to hear that a lot going forward. Oh, and also, if you ever see an overhead attack, this is the beginning of a 3-hit combo that always ends with the power attack as well. Kitsune Courtesan. I really like her look, but the patterns are simple. And for her, it can be one of 2 combos, both of which are 4 hits long and end with a power attack. She even has a spiral attack meant to guard break you, but just perfect dodge any one of these and you should be fine. Or you might see the sweeping 4-hit string. She really leans to either side before starting this, so it's easy to notice it and block the entire thing, or even perfect dodge it if you can. In the case of the combos, if it starts with a leaping overhead, then she'll automatically go into the power attack by the end. Now the other one does start with similar looking vertical attacks, minus the leap at the start. But if you're still having trouble noticing the difference, the dead giveaway is the 3rd swing, and that's because it has her side switch. Once you see that, attack her once to bait out the final power attack. Now once phase 2 starts, she'll leap to the middle. Just stand there and hold guard. It'll prevent you from picking up the essence, but it'll also deny her entire barrage of umbrellas. Be sure to dodge the 5th and final one to avoid a guard break and prep your next online in UT. From here on out, her patterns are exactly the same, so pick up on her different escape options as soon as possible. Sanzian. This very first phase is extremely easy, so it'll teleport to either side of the room as it shoots a variety of projectiles at you. But as long as you approach at an angle, you'll be able to avoid it with ease. From there, mash lights with the rapier. You'll stack up the damage in no time, as you can tell. Now it will try to fight back with a few different power attacks, but they're so easily punished with the trio. Yeah, this part goes down in no time. Phase 2 is no different, which is to lay on the damage with light attacks and force his hand to react. Well, hands in this case. But yeah, just anticipate their power attacks and we'll be able to maintain our turn with little effort. However, there is one unique attack to worry about. So eventually it'll fly to the middle before sending out this saw blade your way. Then it'll slowly track behind you with a few stabs. But mashing out those dash steps should be all you need to get away from it, which is then followed up by this final send away with its blades. Now once it's all done, quickly make your way towards them in the middle because they'll always do a power attack at the end. It's a consistent pattern, so try your best to be there in time. Kurobo should be a very easy boss as long as you stay up close and personal. And lucky for us, the rapier lets us do just that. So go ahead and mash those light attacks as we wait for the boss to retaliate. Now don't panic, because the boss only has 2 combos, both of which are 4 hits long, and will always end with a power attack. So it's super safe to discard the entire thing and prep a Raven attack to begin your turn again. That's sort of the common strategy for many of the bosses going forward, but yeah, just stay on the aggressive and be ready for the combo. Once phase 2 begins, it'll fly off and circle the arena a few times, but once it stops, it's about to zip across the arena. I try to get a wide view to see where it stops, but it does have a very distinct sound cue before swooping along the floor. So react to any of those giveaways and use a glide to avoid this rush attack entirely. But yeah, this phase is not too different than before, so whenever you see that wing attack, you'll always follow up with a power attack. Besides that, it can leap into the air to do a few things. It can immediately land with the twirl that aims to guard break you, or jump back to prep a power attack from a bit away, fly off to prep a swooping attack, or spawn into tornadoes that I can iframe through with the classic dash step when run into flying swallow setup. Vealto? Not sure if that's how you say it, but let's just call it Chaos for now. So this blue goo monster is nothing too different than the other fights. Staying close with the rapier, mash lights, and react to those power attacks. Phase 2 is nothing too different either. Just need to worry about the extra zombies in the arena. I would recommend you clear them out, and that's because the grabs can cause some issues. So hammer it is. We see this? Let's continue to use the rapier's light attacks and be ready. Because once it's about to attack in any way, you want to dash up into run, then end with a single flying swallow. It's not only to iframe through the swipes, but I do this in the hopes to land behind either of the arms. And that's because I'll be free to attack more than usual. If I'm no longer in front of him, it means I don't have to worry about this flip, slam, or grab. So it's sort of a blind spot in a way. Oh, and also, as it's trying to turn and face us, we'll just move along with them since we're tucked into their arm. So yeah, that's the main goal here. But even if you don't get behind them, just start from the top and try again. Now to start of phase 2, wait for the burst and then use the essence to prep your next UT. Now here's an important detail. Do not release so soon. Doing so will have you bounce off. So instead, wait for it to teleport and reappear, then try your best to release on reaction. After that UT ends, fighting phase 2 is no different than before. React and flying swallow. Now it wouldn't be a 3D Ninja Gaiden game without having to fight some heavily armored machine, right? Anyways, since we just got the toolbox, use that. It's a far range weapon, so it's the best option to deal safe but consistent damage. Just need to be quick with your movement to reposition at time. Besides that, it's an extremely straightforward fight. I will say this, try to master its Blood Raven form. The extra damage will come in handy. Now phase 2 is not much different, just a bit more unhinged with the speed and screen pollution. Now its new main attack will be dropping missiles all over the place, while having the sweeping beam go up and down 3 times before charging after you head on. Yeah, it's sort of intense. But luckily it does overheat eventually if you really can't find your openings to attack. As cool as Kagachi might look, he's honestly no more than a glorified DDO commander. And that's because he's a sword wielder with very straightforward behaviors. And yeah, use a rapier and mash lights as always. Now he will guard and parry you as soon as your string ends, so just expect him to counter each and every time, just to be safe. Now his retaliation can be one of 3 things. It can be a power attack with a long horizontal widen up, or he'll stomp the floor once, sending out this tiny AoE burst, or he'll leap backwards. When he does that, he can either descend out this diagonal blade beam, or rush you down with a single swipe. But as long as you block whenever you see him back off, it should cover both options. And that's pretty much it for phase 1. We're going to force his hand to make very predictable follow-ups, which can also be punished. So stay on the aggressive and he'll follow your lead. Once phase 2 begins, he'll do the same thing as any other boss of dropping a single essence before leaping to the center of the room. Now instead of prepping a UT after the initial burst, just wait even longer. He's about to do this massive sweep to begin this fight. So as you're holding guard now to absorb that nearby essence, be sure to use the Caddis War as soon as you see that twirl of his. That's because he's about to do this massive swing. So only after you avoid it, then do you prep an on-landing UT. From there, our strategy is no different than before. Mash lights and force a reaction. Yeah, very deterministic boss fight with not much to worry about. Achilles is made out to be a big deal, but he's sort of a jobber, honestly. All his combos are 2 hits long, and they're very easy to read. So just mash lights with the rapier and react. No need to be fancy with parries or anything like that either. Just block the entire thing, Blood Raven and Ender if it shows up, and then continue to mash lights from there. It really is that simple. Only thing you have to worry about is a command grab, but he makes a distinct sound cue beforehand, and he has a distinct animation as well. Standing still is a big giveaway. So it should be easy to spot in time and back away with a few dashes. Now things only get easier at the start of phase 2, and that's because he doesn't have invulnerable transitional phase. So once he leaps to the middle, go ahead and meet him there. I'd recommend to position yourself behind him and just spam light attacks over and over again. He will summon clones, but ignore them and their initial power attack. Just continue to mash. Yeah, you can erase about half his health bar soon as the second phase begins. From then on, it's the same attacks as before, but he just has some backup is all. But yeah, since he's so heavily damaged already, just hyper focus on Achilles to get rid of his last bit of remaining health. And of course, we had to have a real showdown against the main man himself, Ryu. And yeah, he has a few familiar moves. So he can do a launcher into a Zuna drop, can charge a UT in neutral, maybe even jump away and throw some aerial shortcuts before prepping his own on landing, or he might guard and quickly counter soon after. And as always, I like to use a rapier, so keep on the pressure and be ready to react with that Blood Raven drill. Besides that, remember you can dodge midair, so if he happen to launch you, then there's still a small window for you to escape his powerful Zuna drop. Just be warned, Ryu will still end with a slam, so watch out for that ender before going in for a punish. Now there's going to be a high chance you parry him, which spawns in the Blood Essence, and whenever that happens, be sure to prep your on landing before he does, because it's possible for him to steal it. Now that attention to detail is something I like to see. Broken record, but this sort of concept was already done in Genma Onimusha, where both you and the enemy can fight over the orb. So it's cool to see even more of this Onimusha DNA make its way into a future Ninja Gaiden game. Whether it was intentional or not, still need to see that influence. I'm glad they struck the right balance with these boss fights. Well, yeah, we can die in a few hits, but so can they. So it has a perfect pacing I want to see more often, where it's a short but intense encounter from beginning to end. I just wish they weren't so boring. The Dark Dragon has reared his face once again. Now for this incarnation, it really hangs back, so it's kinda hard to land melee attacks most times. So instead, use your toolbox. This allows you to pelt it from afar with those light attacks. Now it may be a dragon, but it's more like a hungry hippo. And that's because its main attack will be these two massive chomps followed by a power attack. So be ready with the Blood Raven light attack with the toolbox. He does have a few more power attacks, but they're very easy to spot. One of them, for example, is if he decides to fly off close to the edge. That's a pretty massive giveaway he's about to prep his eye to send out this power attack. You'll be able to shut it down before it begins. So yeah, phase 1 should go down pretty easily. Now for phase 2, from what I can tell, it will always begin with a power attack. So be ready with the toolbox light Blood Raven attack. And yeah, same thing as before. Even in this phase, it still has the familiar chomp attacks too. So be ready to shut it down after that second bite. Now it does have a lot more platforms to work with, so whenever it dives below the stage, keep an eye out for when it emerges. Once you spot it, quickly make your way over to them and cover as much ground as possible, because it's about to rain down lightning all around you, so be careful with your movement. But since it's a prolonged power attack, you can counter it with a Blood Raven attack from a good ways away, so use that to your advantage. And that's pretty much it. Use the toolbox's base form for light attacks, anticipate the boss's power attack, Blood Raven form to interrupt it, then mash away with the DDB before beginning the cycle all over again. Here it is. We get to take on the Dark Dragon's Phantom form. And as you can see, it's an identical copy of Yakumo. So we're going to have ourselves a classic rival fight to cap off the game. And hey, if you're a longtime Ninja Gaiden player, then you should be a massive fan of these clone fights. That's because they are by far the most engaging battles of the death you ever have. And yep, that tradition continues here. Now I can't say much about specifics honestly, but since it is a humanoid fight like Kagachi, Ryu, and even Oniwaka, we should be well prepped for this sort of fight. So land a few light attacks with the Dark Dragon Blade, while still being vigilant of their guarding or power attacks. Once interrupted, it's a free punish before he goes back into the usual hyper armor attacks. Anyways, it is pretty cool how he has similar wide sweeping Blood Raven attacks as well, so be ready to chain as many iframes as you can to avoid him. Actually, if you've been paying close attention to your own animations over the course of the playthrough, then you'll be able to spot what the boss is about to do next. Again, very reminiscent of past doppelgangers. But this clone will only use the dual blades and the Tachi, however, so don't expect everything to make an appearance here. But yeah, rely on quick reactions and constant movement. Besides that, have fun fighting the best final boss in the entire 3D series. And that's Ninja Gaiden 4. It's fast, fluid, and visceral. It definitely has the core elements that I was looking for, but with a few added extras. But for comparison, it's a nice mix of 2 and Razor's Edge. More so Razor's Edge, I feel, because of the extra cancels, added evasive maneuvers, sort of similar meter system, the Falcon dives, bit of stealth, chapter challenge, and yeah. And it's pretty cool to see Razor's Edge get some recognition in the fourth game. I think majority of his concepts were pretty amazing, so I'm glad those ideas were retained in some way, while removing the fat like prolonged boss fights and improving on the combat arenas. But they also kept a delim system which applies to everybody, finally, and the overall proactive playstyle of 2. I'm also glad the unfinished enemies of that game weren't an issue here, and neither were the cheesable boss fights. Not to mention its poor performance on the original hardware, right? So NG4 is definitely a more polished game in many regards. Yeah, it's sort of a best of both worlds, which I like, and the reason why it's my game of the year right now. Within the first week, I put in 50 hours into the game, and even got the platinum. So I like it a lot, as you can tell. And as a vanilla release, it has a lot of content right out of the gate. It launched with chapter challenge, mission mode, pseudo boss rush, and a practice mode already available, which again is more than any other vanilla release did on their release. But I have some criticisms. No OTs on handless enemies is a problem. Chapter challenge doesn't remove enough or anything really. Terminals need better clarity to separate self from the background. Rebirth items should fully reheal, not just halfway. No heavy holds after OTs is a massive omission. Even Vanilla 3 had them. Wish we had on-landing jumps for better repositioning, especially around Essence. Speaking of, Blood Essence or healing mechanics in general need a buff or rework. Tyra not being a secret boss is a missed opportunity. Not having anything unlocked for clearing Master Ninja is pretty terrible. Should have given us Phantom Yakumo as an outfit. It sucks there's no theater mode like in past games either, and Ryu is more of an afterthought. It's a shame, but it's true. I know these are very specific and pretty niche, but fixing these issues will make this game so much better. Here's hoping the DLC or future updates can address these in some way. But as of right now, it's insanely fun. And from my perspective, I'm pretty happy with what we received in this game. Not only does it stay true to the NG fundamentals, controlling how I expected it to, while also adding a nice little spin to the overall foundation. And as a reminder, I'm glad each game has their own identity and unique appeal. It gives us something new and refreshing to the series. Who knew it's rather fun to have an open mind to these novel ideas that a new title can bring? With all that said, however, I've had a longing suspicion that this should have been a spin-off, and that's only been solidified once I got my hands on the game. So, I'm just gonna rip the band-aid off. This installment should have never had the 4 attached to it. It's not that it's undeserving, it's more like they're asking to have this overwhelming amount of pressure placed on top of them. In trying to meet these many expectations built upon from a decade-long hiatus, yeah, that seems a little too ambitious for the first outing. So instead, they should have been more transparent that this was a side story. A Gaiden, if you will. Because look at Ragebound. It's not called Ninja Gaiden Episode 4. No, it's clearly its own thing, separate from the NES originals. Which makes it okay to pass on minute details and accept it for what it is rather than what it isn't. And the same could have been said about this game with a small retitle. So something like Ninja Gaiden Bloodbind. Oh, actually, Ninja Gaiden Bloodbound would have been better. Ragebound, Bloodbound. See where I'm going with this? They play off each other and will make it way more obvious that these are companion games that are meant to build upon the established lore. And if you notice, both entries introduce a new main character and relegated Hayabusa to more of a cameo role. So yeah, the grouping works, and this naming convention would have removed any confusion that these games are just here to revive the franchise, specifically with their own take on things. It would also temper expectations that these were supposed to continue Ryu's story in some way. Here's the thing though, having the 4 indicates that it does, but that's not the case. Instead, this game is about a new shinobi's journey of becoming a master ninja. And I'm all for that, honestly. I think it's awesome to expand the ever-growing roster of this franchise. Genji and Komori are great, and I even like Yaiba and Miss Monday. But my favorite of the bunch is Ninja Gaiden Dragon Sword introducing us to Momiji. Not only was her debut game very forward-thinking with its control scheme, but it also had a very important role in the overall story of the series. We get to see key figures that will later return in future titles, which does include the Dark Dragon as the final boss. So just like NGDS, 4 introduced a new set of characters, added new mechanics, and presented certain concepts that might have larger implications than we realize. Because if you look close enough, there's a few things surrounding the idea of interdimensional portals. The shark is constantly making rifts for us to jump through, And there's even a few logs hinting at different worlds that we can visit. Perhaps this will play a larger role if things continue. Maybe it's even setting up the possibility of more crossovers, because as we know, Dead or Alive, Ninja Gaiden, Fatal Frame, Neo, and even Rise of the Ronin are all connected. Maybe this is their explanation on how that all works. But yeah, this should have been a spin-off solely about the new protagonist, just like Dragon Sword, Yaiba, and Ragebound before it. Maybe this game would have been looked at more fondly and judged on its own merits, if it was. Because as you can tell, there's a lot to like here, and reason to want more from Platinum Games. Yeah, in the fear of going in circles, I'll just wrap it up here. I strongly recommend you go into this game not as the fourth main entry, but as a spin-off, because that's what it is. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with being a side game. It allows for more experimentation, honestly. However, that's not the case. And the reality is we have ourselves a new mainline title. It's obviously different, as you can tell, but the same was true going from 1 to 2 and 2 to 3. It's how the series has always been, and the fourth game is no exception. Now those changes or additions made along the way will again most likely cause discord in the community. But this sort of thing has happened time and time again for each and every entry. So why continue to feed into the cycle of knee-jerk reactions that plagued the series, to then sing its praises years later when the tides turn? By now, that sort of behavior is played out and really disingenuous. Of course, we're going to have our criticisms and they should be made known, but it still surprises me that some things haven't changed over the years, and that's a shame. So, as a dedicated fan of the entire franchise, I refuse to repeat history, because otherwise I would be no different than the mass mob that ignored 2, and that's double true in the case for 3. Just wish that was a common sentiment by now. Well, maybe next time.